The void of space no longer held the shimmering constellations that once inspired awe in the Zero species. Instead, it stretched vast and empty, a cold reminder of what had been lost. Rayless Zyvine, once a proud archivist of the Zero Council, drifted through the barren ruins of a civilization that had touched the stars. Now, he was the sole chronicler of their folly. His thoughts coalesced in waves of mournful telepathy, echoing across the desolate chamber of his craft. We were infinite. We were gods in all but name. And yet, we were destroyed by a species we deemed primitive. The Zero had always seen themselves as stewards of knowledge, guardians of the universe's secrets. Their crystalline spires once pierced the skies of 1,000 worlds, their libraries spanning epochs of history from countless species. They were explorers, scholars, creators. War was a distant memory, forgotten in the eons they had spent perfecting their society. And therein lay their greatest flaw. They had forgotten what it meant to fear. Roth floated to the observation deck of his vessel, gazing out at the skeletal remains of Zero Prime. The once vibrant cities now lay as gray scars on the planets. The Inquirus drifted through the ink-black void, its form an elegant latticework of crystalline veins pulsing with iridescent light. Inside, the Zero's telepathic hum filled the air like a harmonious choir, a constant reminder of their shared intellect and purpose. This mission was no different from countless others, cataloging and understanding the species that dotted the cosmos, a ritual of curiosity the Zero had followed for millennia. Rayless Zyvine stood at the central node, surrounded by shimmering displays of information projected from the crystalline walls. The human ship, labeled by its simple designation Farseeker, hung in the void on the screen before him, dwarfed by the Zero craft. Unlike the grand vessels of the Zero, the human ship was a hodgepodge of functionality over form, bulky and worn, yet undeniably determined in its purpose. We've observed them for a full rotation, Raylath communicated to the Council through the telepathic network. Their emotional resonance is unlike anything we've encountered. Fear, hope, and defiance ripple through their minds, even in the quiet moments. Their young display particularly intense emanations. They're young, echoed a voice from the Council node, soft yet resonant with authority. Are they suitable for study? Rolath hesitated. They are extraordinary. There is a latent psychic energy in them, untamed yet potent. It could provide insight into their species' rapid ascension. It is settled, the Council concluded. Select the specimens. Ensure their integrity is preserved. The Inquirus moved closer, its arrival unnoticed by the humans aboard the Farseeker. A faint beam of pale light extended from the Zero ship, enveloping the human craft like a spectral embrace. To the Zero, this process was akin to plucking a petal from a flower. Delicate, precise, and ultimately harmless. The children were chosen in minutes. The Zero's telepathic scans identified them as unique, psychic outliers with profound emotional depth. The process was clinical, silent. The children were taken directly from their quarters, their fragile bodies suspended in protective stasis. Roth observed the children as they were brought aboard, their small forms encased in translucent energy fields. To Zero eyes, they were almost fragile, with soft skin and round, expressive faces. Yet their minds blazed with intensity, their thoughts like storms barely contained. One girl, in particular, drew his focus. She was small and wiry, with tangled hair and a face frozen in defiance even as she lay unconscious. Her mind pulsed with an unusual rhythm, a strength that seemed to radiate outward even in stasis. This one, Rilath murmured to himself, his thoughts reverberating through the chamber. Her resonance is different, stronger. In their crystalline cells, the children began to stir. The stasis fields dissolved gradually, allowing them to awaken naturally. Rilath and his team observed from the adjoining node, their collective thoughts merging into a singular analytical focus. The children woke in confusion, their wide eyes darting around the chamber. The room was vast, its walls glowing with soft, pulsating light that seemed to hum with life. The floor beneath them was smooth and cool, almost alive to the touch. "Where are we?" whispered a boy, his voice trembling. "I don't know," replied another, older and calmer. "Stay together." The girl Rayleth had noticed earlier was the first to stand, her fists clenched. "Whoever you are," she shouted into the shimmering void, "you can't keep us here." Her voice rang out, carried not only by sound but by the faintest ripple of psychic energy. The Zero monitoring her recoiled slightly, an unfamiliar sensation prickling through their mental shields. "Fascinating," one of the researchers transmitted. "Their emotions amplify their psychic output. Such raw, unrefined potential." To Roloth, however, the girl's defiance was more than just a scientific anomaly. It was a warning, though he did not yet understand its full weight. Later, as the Zero began their experiments, the children's terror and anger grew palpable. The Zero prided themselves on non-invasive methods, but to the children, every procedure felt intrusive, violating. They were subjected to dream projections, their memories examined like fragile artifacts. The youngest, a boy no older than 6, sobbed quietly, his mind crying out for his parents. His distress created ripples in the Zero's telepathic network, momentarily disorienting the researchers. The girl was different. She fought with every fiber of her being, her mind pushing back against the Zero's probes. Her resistance was clumsy but potent, like a hammer battering against glass. Roloth felt the first stirrings of unease. "They are not like the others we've studied," he transmitted to the council. "Their psychic energy is volatile. Their emotions, unpredictable." "Such volatility will yield insight," the council replied dismissively. "Continue the observations." As the children huddled together in the glowing chamber, their fear and anger simmered, forming a bond that even the Zero's telepathic probes could not penetrate. Roloth watched them silently, their thoughts bleeding through his mind like ink spreading across water. In their desperation, he saw something the Zero had long forgotten: the raw, unyielding power of connection, of loyalty, of the primal need to protect one's own. For the first time, he wondered if they had made a mistake. The Zero research chamber was a masterpiece of their civilization, a space where thought and matter merged seamlessly. Its walls, made of a living crystalline substance, pulsed faintly with a calming glow, designed to soothe the minds of both subject and observer. Yet, within this haven of knowledge, the 5 human children seemed immune to such comforts. Their emotions churned in a chaotic tempest that rippled through the Zero's telepathic networks like discordant echoes. Rayless Zyvine stood at the central node. His consciousness merged with the observation nexus. Streams of data, both psychic and physical, cascaded around him. The children sat huddled together in the middle of the chamber, their postures defensive, their faces a mix of fear, defiance, and confusion. "Their psychic resonance is intensifying," transmitted one of the researchers, a faint telepathic hum in Roloth's mind. "Even when stationary, their emotions are creating ripples. It is unprecedented." "Focus on the task," Roloth replied, though his own unease was growing. "Their potential must be quantified." The Zero initiated their first experiment, dream projection. It was a gentle process by their standards, intended to observe how the human mind responded to constructed realities. The crystalline walls of the chamber dimmed, and shimmering waves of energy cascaded down, enveloping the children in a soft, radiant mist. The youngest, a boy named Jonah, whimpered as his eyelids fluttered shut. His breathing quickened, and his small fists clenched. The Zero's projections drew from his subconscious, creating a scene of a sunlit field where he once played with his mother. But even this idyllic vision was fractured by his growing awareness of his captors. The memory blurred, darkened, and twisted. The boy cried out, his fear amplifying into an emotional surge that disrupted the Zero's mental cohesion. "Stabilize the resonance," ordered Roloth, his voice sharp in the telepathic network. The researchers struggled to contain the feedback. For the first time, they realized the children's emotional output was more potent than expected, creating disruptions that rippled unpredictably through the Zero's carefully constructed systems. Lucy, the girl who had defied them from the beginning, remained an outlier. She resisted the projections entirely, her psychic energy forming a crude but impenetrable shield. When the Zero attempted to penetrate her defenses, she fought back, not with finesse, but with raw, unrelenting force. "I can feel her mind," one researcher transmitted, their thoughts tinged with awe and discomfort. "It is unlike anything I have encountered. It burns, chaotic and relentless." Lucy's resistance grew bolder. She began to lash out, her psychic energy striking at the Zero like lightning. The crystalline walls shimmered violently, their once soothing glow flickering as her attacks disrupted the chamber's equilibrium. Roloth observed her, both fascinated and alarmed. "This is no ordinary child," he thought. "Her mind is primal, fierce. She is unlike the others. The Zero's experiments continued, escalating in complexity and intensity. They probed memories, tested the limits of the children's psychic endurance, and even attempted to implant false visions to measure their responses. But with every test, the children grew more resistant. Even the youngest began to show signs of adaptation. Jonah, once trembling with fear, clung to the others, drawing strength from their presence. Their bond was unyielding, a force that the Zero had not accounted for. They are connected, Rayloth realized, his thoughts heavy with an unease that deepened with each passing moment. Their emotions amplify one another, creating a network we cannot breach. They are stronger together than apart. On the fifth day, the Zero attempted a new experiment. They introduced a telepathic projection of comfort, designed to lull the children into compliance. The projection took the form of a familiar human voice, soft and soothing. "Lucy," it whispered, mimicking the tones of a loving parent. "It's okay. You're safe. Just let us help you." Lucy's reaction was immediate and violent. She screamed, her voice echoing through the chamber as a wave of psychic energy erupted from her. The crystalline walls fractured, their shimmering glow shattering into shards of light. The Zero researchers recoiled, their telepathic bonds severed by the sheer force of her defiance. "Enough!" Rayloth transmitted, his thoughts cutting through the chaos. He stepped into the chamber, his presence a towering, luminous form of crystalline energy. The children shrank back, but Lucy met his gaze with unflinching fury. "You think we're weak," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "You think you can take us apart like toys. But we're not toys. And we're not afraid of you." Her words resonated in the chamber, her defiance rippling through the Zero network. For a moment, Rayloth saw the enormity of their mistake. These children were not merely subjects for study. They were something far more dangerous. Back in the observation node, Rayloth communicated with the council. "These experiments are yielding unintended consequences," he said carefully. "Their psychic energy is destabilizing our systems. Their emotional intensity is uncontrollable." The council's response was dismissive. "They are specimens. The disruptions are a minor inconvenience. Continue the research." But Rayloth knew better. As he returned to the observation chamber, he felt a creeping dread. The Zero had underestimated these children, and, by extension, the species that had created them. He looked at the children, huddled together, their minds a storm of fear, anger, and unity. And for the first time in his long life, Rayloth Zivine, archivist of the Zero Council, felt the stirrings of fear. The stars burned cold and distant as the Farseeker's distress signal reached its destination. The message, fragmented but urgent, carried images of the Zero ship and the faces of the 5 missing children. Across Earth and its colonies, the transmission was received with growing horror. Lucy's father, a miner on the Martian frontier, gripped the edge of the broadcast console as his daughter's terrified face flickered on the screen. A recording of Jonah's mother sobbing for her son played on every media platform. Across humanity, outrage began to build, anger like a spark igniting a forest. Humanity's collective psyche had been shaped by millennia of strife. While the Zero had ascended into serene enlightenment, humanity had clawed its way through wars, famines, and cataclysms. Their history had tempered them like steel, and this act of alien aggression struck a primal chord. The United Earth Command, an organization built for exploration but ready for war, acted immediately. Within days, a fleet of warships, powerful vessels equipped with reverse-engineered alien technology, set out in pursuit of the abductors. The Zero vessel, Inquirus, floated in serene oblivion, its crew absorbed in their studies of the human children. They barely registered the incoming fleet until it was upon them. The first strike came in the form of a kinetic bombardment, a devastating barrage of projectiles that tore through the outer hull. Alarms resonated through the ship, the psychic hum of the crew shifting from calm inquiry to panic chaos. Rayloth Zivine raced to the observation node, his crystalline form flickering with unease. "We are under attack." A researcher transmitted, their thoughts frantic. "The humans have found us." Rayloth accessed the external feed, projecting the image of the human fleet. Sleek, angular warships bristling with weapons surrounded the Inquirus, their movements precise and purposeful. Humanity had no intention of negotiating. "Transmit our intentions," Rayloth ordered. They must understand that this was a peaceful endeavor. But before the Zero could send a message, a second barrage struck. This time, the hull breached, exposing sections of the ship to the vacuum of space. Energy shields flickered and failed. Reth's mind reeled as he felt the psychic screams of his crewmates, their once harmonious consciousnesses dissolving into a cacophony of fear and pain. The humans were not merely retaliating, they were annihilating. News of the attack spread across human colonies like wildfire. Videos of the strike, accompanied by the haunting cries of the children, were broadcast in every language. The children's plight became a symbol, a rallying cry for a united humanity. We will not stand by while our children are stolen, declared Earth's leaders. The Zero must learn that humanity is not to be trifled with. Public sentiment shifted rapidly from outrage to bloodlust. Civilian volunteers flooded recruitment offices. Factories on Earth and Mars churned out warships and weapons at unprecedented speed. Humanity, a species that had spent centuries teetering on the edge of unity, was now galvanized by a singular purpose: vengeance. The Inquirus was destroyed within hours, but the Zero's ordeal had only just begun. The human fleet advanced into Zero space with terrifying speed, targeting exploratory vessels and outposts. The Zero, unprepared for war, struggled to respond. Their ships, designed for exploration and diplomacy, were no match for the heavily armed human fleet. Zero defenses, once thought impenetrable, crumbled under humanity's relentless assault. On the surface of Zero colonies, panic spread like wildfire. Civilians, unaccustomed to violence, fled as human bombardments reduced cities to rubble. Entire worlds burned under humanity's wrath. Roloth, now aboard a council vessel, watched in horror as reports flooded in from across the Zero network. "They're dismantling us," he transmitted to the council. "System by system. This is not retaliation, it is extermination." The council, desperate to salvage their civilization, reached out to humanity with offers of peace. But every attempt at communication was met with silence or destruction. Humanity's anger was a fire that would not be extinguished. The turning point came when a daring human raid breached the Zero research facility where the children were held. A squadron of heavily armed soldiers stormed the compound, cutting down Zero researchers who attempted to resist. Lucy and the others were found in the central chamber, weakened but alive. When the soldiers reached them, Lucy stood protectively in front of the younger children, her eyes blazing with defiance even after all they had endured. "You came for us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Always," one soldier replied, scooping her into his arms. The children's rescue was broadcast across human space, cementing their status as symbols of resilience. But it also fueled humanity's unrelenting rage. Their children had been taken, their innocence violated. The Zero, once a beacon of knowledge and enlightenment, were now nothing more than monsters in the eyes of humanity. Despite the children's safe return, humanity did not stop. The Zero had made a fatal mistake, and humanity intended to make an example of them. Raloth watched helplessly as Zero Prime, the crown jewel of their civilization, came under siege. Human ships descended upon the planet like a swarm, unleashing devastation on a scale the Zero had never imagined. Their once pristine cities, their hallowed libraries of knowledge, were reduced to ash and rubble. The Zero, once masters of the stars, now faced extinction. As the Zero Council dissolved into chaos, Raloth felt the weight of their hubris pressing down on him. They had underestimated humanity, its capacity for rage, its willingness to protect its own at any cost. And as the human fleet turned its sights to the next Zero system, Raloth understood with bitter clarity: the Zero had sought to study humanity, but they had unleashed something far more powerful than they could have ever predicted. The Zero homeworld, Zero Prime, once shone like a beacon in the void of space. Its surface was adorned with crystalline spires that reached for the heavens, each a monument to millennia of knowledge and unity. The planet was a sanctuary of enlightenment, untouched by the ravages of war for countless generations. Now, it burned. Humanity's fleet darkened the skies, their ships raining destruction upon the cities below. Orbital bombardments scorched the surface, reducing the grand edifices of the Zero civilization to rubble. Entire libraries, vaults of wisdom gathered over eons, were incinerated in moments. Rayless Sivine stood in the central chamber of the council spire, watching the devastation unfold through a shimmering projection. The psychic hum of his remaining comrades was fractured, discordant with fear and despair. "They're unstoppable," one voice transmitted, trembling. "Our defenses are gone. Our fleets are scattered. They will leave nothing." Raloth remained silent, his crystalline form dimming as the weight of his failure consumed him. He had once believed in the Zero's mission: to explore, to learn, to uplift. But their arrogance had blinded them. They had taken what they had no right to, and now they were paying the ultimate price. On the outskirts of Zero Prime, the remnants of the Zero fleet made a desperate stand. Ships of shimmering crystal, designed for exploration and diplomacy, turned their elegant forms into weapons of necessity. Energy beams lanced through the void, striking at the human fleet with all the precision the Zero could muster. But the humans were prepared. Their ships, bristling with weapons, absorbed the counterattacks and retaliated with brutal efficiency. Massive railguns fired kinetic projectiles that tore through the Zero ships, shattering their crystalline structures into glittering debris. On the surface, ground forces mobilized, deploying what meager defenses the Zero had left. Energy barriers flickered to life, and drones swarmed the skies, attempting to repel the incoming human landing parties. It was futile. Humanity had come not just to defeat the Zero but to erase them. Human soldiers landed in waves, their armor gleaming under the fiery glow of Zero Prime's burning cities. Their boots crushed the crystalline streets as they advanced, methodically eliminating resistance. The Zero, unaccustomed to physical combat, attempted to fight back with their psychic abilities. Waves of telepathic energy swept over the human invaders, inducing disorientation and fear. But the humans had anticipated this. Their helmets were equipped with neural dampeners, blocking most of the psychic attacks. "Clear the sector," barked a commander, her voice cold and determined. No survivors. R'lyeh could feel their presence, a storm of anger and determination. The humans were unlike anything he had ever encountered, unyielding, relentless, and utterly devoid of mercy. In the depths of the council spire, the remaining Zero gathered, their psychic network buzzing with desperation. "We must surrender," one elder pleaded. "Perhaps they will show us clemency." "There is no clemency in them," R'lyeh replied, his voice heavy. "We have seen what they do to our colonies. They will not stop until nothing remains." The council spire, the heart of Zero civilization, trembled as human forces breached its outer defenses. Explosions echoed through the halls, and the once harmonious hum of the Zero network became a chaotic cacophony. R'lyeh stood in the central chamber, gazing at the psychic node that had once connected the Zero to their countless colonies. Now, it was fractured, its light dimming with every passing moment. "They are here," transmitted a researcher, their voice trembling with fear. "The humans have reached the inner sanctum." R'lyeh turned to face the shimmering doors as they began to collapse under the weight of human weaponry. He could feel the humans' thoughts pressing against his own, a maelstrom of anger, grief, and resolve. As the doors fell, a squad of human soldiers entered, their weapons raised. Their leader, a tall woman with piercing eyes, stepped forward. Her voice was cold and unyielding. "Are you R'lyeh Zyvine?" "I am," he replied, his crystalline form shimmering faintly. "Then you understand why we're here," she said. "You took our children. You experimented on them. For that, your people will pay." R'lyeh felt the weight of her words, the raw pain and fury behind them. "We did not understand," he said softly. "We sought knowledge. We underestimated you." "Underestimated?" The soldier spat. "You tore apart families. You violated everything we hold sacred. Now you'll learn what that costs." Her voice was not loud, but it carried the fury of an entire species. The human forces planted charges throughout the council spire, ensuring nothing of the Zero's legacy would survive. R'lyeh watched as the soldiers left, their mission complete. As the charges detonated, the spire crumbled, its elegant crystalline structure collapsing into a cloud of ash and light. Across the planet, similar scenes played out, cities falling, archives burning, and the Zero people vanishing into the void. R'lyeh's consciousness drifted, untethered, as his physical form was obliterated. In his final moments, he reached out with what remained of his psychic energy, searching for meaning in the chaos. He found only silence. The Zero were gone. And humanity, unbroken and unrelenting, continued its march across the stars. The galaxy was silent. Where the Zero had once thrived, there was now only ruin, empty systems, charred planets, and drifting remnants of crystalline ships. The last embers of their civilization had been snuffed out, leaving behind a void where once there was light. In the years that followed, humanity spread its presence into former Zero territories, claiming the remnants of their worlds. Expeditions scavenged shattered archives and looted fragments of their advanced technologies. What could be salvaged was repurposed. What could not was discarded. The Zero were now a memory, a cautionary tale of what happened when one underestimated humanity. From the void of annihilation, a lone consciousness lingered, R'lyeh Zyvine, or what remained of him. His physical form was gone, destroyed in the collapse of the council spire, but a fragment of his essence persisted in the Zero's fractured psychic network, like a faint ember in a dying fire. He drifted through the remnants of his people's shared memory, a vast and broken tapestry of voices, thoughts, and emotions. The network, once vibrant and alive, was now desolate, a graveyard of echoes. From this liminal space, Roloth reflected, his thoughts winding through the ruins of his choices and the legacy of his species. We thought ourselves enlightened, he mused. We believed we had transcended the baser instincts of survival and violence. But we were fools. We sought knowledge without regard for its consequences, and in our arrogance, we invited destruction. Roth's thoughts turned to humanity, the species that had shattered the Zero. They were so different from his own, volatile, driven by emotion, yet undeniably powerful. He had underestimated them, as had the Council, and that miscalculation had been fatal. They are not like us, he thought. They burn with a fire we could never understand, a fire that unites them in the face of loss and drives them to unimaginable heights. We saw only their fragility, their youth, and dismissed them. That was our undoing. The war against the Zero changed humanity. The sense of unity forged in their pursuit of vengeance lingered, but it came at a cost. The ruthlessness they had unleashed to destroy the Zero did not fade. It became a part of their identity. Earth's leaders celebrated their victory, proclaiming humanity's dominance in the galaxy. Statues were erected to honor the 5 children, their faces immortalized in marble and steel. They were no longer just survivors, they were heroes, symbols of humanity's resilience and the lengths it would go to protect its own. But beneath the triumph, there were whispers of unease. Historians, philosophers, and ordinary citizens began to question the morality of what had been done. Entire worlds had been annihilated. An ancient, advanced species had been wiped from existence. Was it justice? They asked. Or was it something darker? The children, now growing into adolescence, carried the weight of their ordeal. Lucy, once a defiant spark of resistance, became a symbol of strength but also a living reminder of the Zero's final mistake. Jonah, the youngest, struggled with nightmares of crystalline halls and alien eyes. As humanity expanded, they encountered the ruins of other civilizations, vast, lifeless worlds consumed by time. Some speculated that the Zero had once stood where humanity now did, triumphant and unchallenged, only to fall into obscurity. From the void, Roloth's lingering essence watched as humanity continued its rise. He saw their ingenuity, their tenacity, and their ability to adapt. But he also saw the seeds of their downfall. You are powerful, he thought, his voice a faint whisper carried on the psychic winds. But you are not infallible. Your fire burns bright, but it will consume you if you are not careful. Learn from us, from what we failed to see in you. Relis's consciousness began to fade, his energy dissipating into the emptiness. But before he disappeared entirely, he left behind one final impression. A psychic echo, imprinted faintly on the ruins of Zero Prime. It was a message, simple yet profound, carried on the winds of the cosmos. Beware the arrogance of believing you are invincible. For even the brightest stars can burn out. Generations later, humanity continued to thrive, their empire stretching across the stars. But the memory of the Zero lingered, a shadow over their triumphs. Explorers and scholars ventured into the ruins of Zero space, seeking to understand the species they had destroyed. Some found remnants of Zero technology and knowledge, marveling at the brilliance of a lost civilization. Others found the faint psychic echoes of Raylath's warning, though few truly understood its meaning. In the end, the Zero were reduced to myths and cautionary tales, their story woven into the tapestry of humanity's rise. But in quiet moments, when the stars burned bright and the void seemed endless, some wondered if humanity too might one day face a reckoning. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, the last remnants of the Zero's light flickered, a silent reminder of the price of hubris and the power of fire.